Two calls. Hi, I'm Dave Arnott, the Christian Economist. There's a graduation speech I've given for Christian colleges that asks two pretty big questions. Number one, who are you? Number two, what are you going to do? I admit, those are pretty big questions for a 20-minute graduation speech, and frankly, I feel bad for students who spent 4 years listening to a college professor, and then they're forced to listen to another one before they are allowed to receive their diploma. But I'm asking those same two questions today, and I'll try to provide a Christian economics viewpoint. Our first subtopic is specialization, something we talk a lot about in economics. Malcolm Gladwell is one of my favorite authors. I've read The Tipping Point, Blink, Outliers, What the Dog Saw, David versus Goliath, and most recently, Talking with Strangers. In his book, David versus Goliath, he tells a fascinating view of the Old Testament story of David and Goliath from a specialization point of view. He says that warriors in that day were, like our current game, rock, paper, and scissors. Now, David was a slinger. More on that in a moment. But here's how the rock, paper, scissors works. Mounted cavalry on horses were too fast for slingers. Infantry had an advantage over cavalry. And slingers, like David, had an advantage over slow, lumbering infantrymen like Goliath. See, it's estimated slingers like David could hit a target from 200 yards. The Romans actually had an instrument designed specifically to remove a stone that was embedded in the flesh of a warrior by a slinger like David. So I'm left wondering, some of the warriors on both ridges that day were saying, yeah, I got 5 denarii on the kid. See, his specialization as a slinger gave him an advantage over a slow-moving infantryman like Goliath. Specialization is an important topic in economics, and the point is, God wants us to specialize. Hey, Mike Rowe, he's known as the Dirty Jobs guy from the popular TV series he hosted. His 5-minute video on PragerU advises graduates not to follow their passion, to extend it to the Christian worldview. It's because your passion is about you. But we don't believe life is about you. We believe we are called to care for others. We sometimes call that servant leadership at my university. The idea is others come first and I come second. I tell my students that their friends and family have guided them throughout their young lives. Many of them played on soccer teams as little kids, but now almost none of them do. They have been told throughout their life, soccer is not for you. Maybe you should try the tuba, or volleyball, or baseball, or singing, or art. See, we believe those people are God's viceroys, and they're guiding my students to a point where they can make a greater contribution to their neighbors. That's what specialization is. So if you love your neighbor as you love yourself, you will not follow your passion. You will allow yourself to be guided by your friends and neighbors as they tell you how to provide products and services that enrich them. See, passion is about you. Your work should serve others, not yourself. So Mike Rowe is correct. We have a good baseball team at DBU. By watching them, I've learned that there are at least 4 specializations among pitchers. There are starters, long relievers, setup pitchers, and closers. There might even be a couple more that I don't know about. But the point is, you thought they just threw a baseball as hard as they could. No, but there's specialization in baseball, specialization in medicine, and in business, and in all areas of life. See, God makes us all different, so our specialization can be shown to enrich our neighbors. Jesus specialized in carpentry. My podcast number 2 is titled The Prophet Who Made a Profit. Because he did. From the ages of about 14 to 30, Jesus worked with his dad in some kind of construction or making furniture of some kind. We don't know the details. We do know he had a specialized skill. We all do. The sooner we find that God-given skill, the sooner we can start creating value for our neighbors. Look, in this critical book, The Wealth of Nations, Adam Smith writes about the impressive increase in production of pins through specialization. By pins, I mean those kinds that are in your new shirt or blouse, right? The stick pin. See, in the craft era, one person performed all steps of the process: drawing the wire, cutting the wire, sharpening the point, welding the head. By the way, that should make you thankful for your current job. Would you like to weld heads on pins all day? Okay, back to my point. And then wrapping the finished pin in paper. When the process was specialized, performance improved by over 1,000%. As I've said so many times on these podcasts, if you love your neighbor, you will supply products and services she demands. With specialization, we can produce a greater supply at a lower cost. That's a good way to love your neighbor. All right, here's another economics subtitle for you: the production possibilities curve. In economics, we talk about the production possibilities curve. It shows the maximum amount that can be produced within the scarce limits of the resources that are available. So firms and individuals can produce at lower levels than the production possibility curves, but that's considered social loafing because you're not producing as much as you could for your neighbors. Look, we have 7 colleges at Dallas Baptist University. Students are guided into the one where they will produce the greatest resources. In his book, How Then Shall We Work?, Hugh Welchel says, God made something out of nothing. Our job is to make something out of something. Good point, Hugh. That something is greater when we specialize in a free market capitalist system. Here's the problem with the opposite, which is socialism. It assumes everyone makes the same contribution. So I could play power forward as effectively as LeBron James, and he could teach economics as effectively as I do. That's a really bad assumption. The French government went so far many years ago as to reduce the work week from 40 to 35 hours to spread the labor around, thinking they would lower unemployment. It doesn't work that way. That was based on the assumption that everyone produced the same amount of productivity. What a silly assumption. Predictably, GDP went down. Can you imagine? The National Football League putting a time limit on Tom Brady's minutes in the game? You should never do that. Look, in Biblical Economic Policy, the book that's coming out soon by Sergei Seidamatov and I, we write that people should be free. That means free to work at the specialization where they create the greatest value for their neighbors. Socialism does not free them to do what they want. It's the main point of the book, The Road to Serfdom by Friedrich von Hayek. When people are forced into labor that they don't choose, they underperform. And the entire society is on, quote, the road to serfdom, thus the name of Hayek's book. Here's another subtopic. How about better together? We are better together when we all play our specialized part that God designed for us. All right, 1 Corinthians 12, starting in verse 12. The body is a unit, though it is composed of many parts. And although its parts are many, they all form one body. So it is with Christ. For in one Spirit we are all baptized into one body, whether Jews or Greeks, slave or free, and we are all given one Spirit. For the body does not consist of one part, but of many. If the foot should say, because I'm not a hand, I don't belong to the body, that would not make it any less part of the body. And if the ear should say, because I'm not an eye, I do not belong to the body, that would not make it any less a part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would the sense of hearing be? If the whole body were an ear, where would the sense of smell be? But in fact, God has arranged the members of the body, every one of them according to his design. If they were all one part, where would the body be? As it is, there are many parts, but one body. The eye cannot say to the hand, I don't need you, nor can the head say to the feet, I don't need you. On the contrary, parts of the body that seem to be weaker are indispensable, and the parts we consider less honorable we treat with greatest honor. And our unpresentable parts are treated with special modesty, whereas our presentable parts have no such need. But God has composed the body and has given greater honor to the parts that lacked it, so that there should be no division in the body, but that its members should have mutual concern for one another. If one part suffers, every part suffers with it. If one part is honored, every part rejoices with it. Concluding with verse 26 of 1 Corinthians 12. the point to be made is that we're all parts. We specialize and make the contribution that God intended us to make. If you're well-read in Christian materials, you realize my title today, Two Calls, comes from a very good book by an author named Os Guinness. The book is called The Call. He says our first call is to be, and our second call is to do. If you find out first who you be, sorry for the bad English, then what you do will follow pretty naturally from that. A chapter in the book, The Call, is titled An Audience of One. It relates the story of Andrew Carnegie's mother, Margaret Carnegie, who fled Dunfermline, Scotland, in poverty. Her life goal was to show the people of Dunfermline that she was rich. What a low goal. What a wasted life. She was living her life for the audience of that small Scottish town. Guinness encourages us to live for, quote, an audience of one, end quote. And that's the sign that hangs over the entry to the Berg Gymnasium at Dallas Baptist University. Our athletes are encouraged not to play for their parents or friends, or even their coach or their fellow teammates. They're encouraged to play for, quote, an audience of one. This makes perfect sense in economics. We call it specialization, that we should specialize in what God wants us to do. That's a message we get from this previously related story by Mike Rowe. Don't serve your passions. Serve the demands of your neighbors. Another of the 10 Commandments of Biblical Economics in the forthcoming book, Biblical Economic Policy by Sergei Seidamatov and Dave Arnott, is trade is good. Trade is good. We believe the Bible encourages to make what we make best and trade it to others who are doing what they make best. Another of the 10 Commandments we have in that book is to take care of widows and orphans in their distress. The New Testament tells us to do this because in the first century, widows and orphans did not own land, so they could not take care of themselves. They had no ability to produce value in an agrarian society. I believe we still have the command to take care of other people who can't take care of themselves, although the landowning requirement is not what makes people poor in the 21st century. There are two significant differences now the first century folks cared for the poor and how we care for them today. Number one, it was done by the church in the first century. Today, much of the care of the poor is performed by the government. It's not my topic today, so I'll simply state that fact and move on. Number two, there are specific guidelines or qualifications for the widows and orphans, like did she care for others and did she have a good spirit? The conclusion is we are still commanded to care for the poor. How that relates to our subject today is this. The more specialized you are, the more you are able to care for widows and orphans. Another of those 10 commandments in our book is called Don't Covet. You may have heard that one, and we borrowed it from Moses. In the context of specialization, that means don't desire the specialized abilities of others. Yeah, I used to be a member of the National Speakers Association. I made part of my living giving formal speeches. When I would hear someone else speak, I wish I could speak like them, but that's coveting. God gave me the ability to speak in a certain way, and he gave others their speaking ability and their style. Matter of fact, as I was writing the previous section here about Os Guinness's book, The Call, I was wishing I could write like him. I can't. God gave Os Guinness his skill, and he uses it to glorify God. The same God gave me different abilities and different people to teach. I'm able to teach economics to about 50 DBU students twice a week. I am blessed to have those students to visit with. That is my calling. I teach at a liberal arts university. See, the Romans decided that if they're going to give commoners the right to vote, they needed a broad education so they could understand the issues of the day. That's the genesis of the idea of liberal arts. The trivium, just a big word for three, is grammar, rhetoric, and logic. After understanding those, you could move on to the quadrivium, just a big word for four, which included math, music, geometry, and astronomy. After mastering those 7 liberal arts, you could go on to the higher learning of theology and philosophy. Now, here's how the liberal arts ties into specialization, which is my subject today. The purpose is to understand a broad range of information, but specialize in one area of work so you can serve society. See, the Romans assumed it was not about you, it was about society. You had to learn the liberal arts so you could serve others. Last subtopic, a vocation. Tim Keller, in his book Every Good Endeavor, says students choose vocations that are cool, that impress their friends, and are not really what God wants them to do. They have good intent, but usually not good outcomes. I have to wonder how many students are studying ministry to satisfy their youth minister or maybe their grandparent. We should satisfy others' needs, not their view of us. You see the difference? Because that only satisfies our self-esteem. God clearly wants us to get our self-esteem from our relationship with Him, not from human approval from others. The word vocare is a Latin word that means a call. That's my topic today. 2 calls. The word vocare means a call. So our vocations are a calling. We are called to specialize in ways that supply the demands of our neighbors. Let's go and do our calling. But first, find out who you are, then determine what you will do. I'm Dave Arnott, the Christian Economist, where our slogan is, fear God, tell the truth, earn a profit. See you next time.